We're all human. Not every performance is going to go exactly as you intended, but sometimes you have a pleasant surprise and things go in directions that you didn't even expect them to. How do you deal with stage fright? Oh boy, this is a great question. And you know, all performers face this. In fact, that's how you know you're alive. You have a pulse, and boy, the pulse gets faster, and your whole metabolism speeds up if you're a normal person when you're in front of a whole crowd staring at you. It's normal behavior. Well, how do you deal with that? Well, we're going to address that today, give you some pointers. All right, so first of all, you should know that this is a normal physiological response that comes from fight or flight from prehistoric times when indeed, when there was a challenging situation, the metabolism had to speed up to deal with the dangers that were around. Well, we're in a modern society now, and these same reactions are not necessarily appropriate in a musical or other performance, but you have to deal with it. The key is to be able to use that energy positively. How is this possible? Well, there are a few very important things. First of all, preparation. Yes. One of the recurring dreams that I have, by the way, is being on stage, playing a piece, knowing while I'm playing that piece that I have not finished memorizing it. And there I am without the score, and I'm playing this piece, not knowing what I'm going to do when I get to the end of the piece. It's an absolutely terrorizing thought to be in front of an audience and know that there's no way out. Well, you don't want to ever face that in real life. That is truly a nightmare. So, prepare like crazy. The more prepared you are, the more you can relax and enjoy the performance. If you're worried about something because you get it sometimes and other times you don't get it, of course you're going to be nervous. It would be crazy not to be nervous. You're playing Russian roulette with your performance. Prepare as much as you possibly can. But that's not all. You must prepare by practicing performing. That's right. You can spend all the time you want practicing by yourself, lock yourself in a practice room hours and hours a day, and still, if it's the first time you've gotten in front of an audience, is in front of the formal setting, you're going to face a lot of things that you have not faced before. So, start off with small groups, even one good friend or family member. Say, you know, I've got this performance coming up. Could you listen to this piece or this program? Then, as you get comfortable playing for one or two people, then expand it. Invite a bunch of friends. Have a piano party or a cello party, whatever instrument you play. And then go through the program in a formal kind of way so that it's just like the real thing, except you don't have the pressure of having a bunch of people you don't know there. Make it people you're comfortable around. You will learn so much by this, you will have no idea. It also hones in your practicing, so your practice becomes more effective. Places that you've worked on time and time again, you realize, hey, those are easy. But other parts that you didn't even realize are problem parts, you will discover things. Not only that, but the whole pacing of the program or the pacing of the pieces you're playing, you'll get a sense of that as well. Now, there are other things you can do to prepare, both physically and emotionally. Let's start with physically. You want to make sure you are well rested on the day of the performance. Try to keep it very much like your normal routine as much as possible, but there's some sensible things you can do. One of the things that Nadia asked was the suggestion of having tea. Would that be calming? Well, if it's decaffeinated tea or herbal tea, sure, but you know, caffeine, you want to not have too much caffeine on a day of a performance if you're concerned about nerves, because caffeine naturally makes you excited. You don't need that. You've already got a lot of energy, nervous energy working for you. How do you make that nervous energy work for you? Before I get into that, let me mention a couple of other things in the physiological department. Sure, eating balanced meals. You don't want to have a bunch of sugar before you go on either. Things like bananas, rice, calming foods. You don't want to eat a whole big meal just before you go on, but you don't want to be hungry right in the middle of your performance. Time it so you're physically feeling good on stage. Now the all-important mental attitude and mental preparation and emotional preparation. This is vital, and if you have the right mental preparation, you'd be surprised what you can overcome. I've had some times where my schedule has gotten so intensely busy that I've had to literally go right from working, being on the phone, doing emails, correspondence, to right there on the concert stage with barely a moment to prepare. But how was I able to do this effectively? Well, the secret is thinking about the moment of performance well beforehand, and think about it a lot. It's not the kind of thing that some people think you should, put it out of your mind completely. When you go out on stage, pretend the audience isn't there and maybe you won't be nervous. This is a great mistake. The audience is there and you will be aware of them. Believe me, there's no way to block it out of your mind. Instead, embrace the audience. That's why you want to play concerts, isn't it? To share your music with the audience, all your hard work and your ideas and your passion for the music. You want to show others what you have discovered and what you believe is important in the music. So you could even go so far as to do a kind of meditation, kind of a relaxation, really. Think about performing while you're lying down, breathing slowly with your eyes closed. One thing that I found years ago is incredibly helpful is think not only of that moment, but if you're a pianist, think, or if you're another instrumentalist, think of what you're actually seeing. So if I know I'm playing, let's say, a Baldwin or a Steinway piano, I'll imagine sitting on the bench, seeing that logo, take a deep breath, be very relaxed, feel the sense of the audience being there even before I get out there. So then I get to the actual performance, I sit on the bench, take one deep breath, look at the name of the piano, and it puts me back in that relaxed sense, and I'm ready for the concert that I've been thinking about for so long. You can do that with any instrument, just visualizing the moment that you're going to be performing so you can enjoy it. After all, performing can be an incredibly rewarding experience if you are prepared psychologically, you're prepared musically and physically, and go out there and give it your best and enjoy your performance. And you too can overcome nerves. You will always have some nervous energy. Learn how to use it positively. Sometimes you can actually have pleasant surprises because of that nervous energy makes your brain go faster and you'll discover things in your playing. And if you've prepared well enough, you can have a wild ride and bring the audience along with you. The psychology of performing. And this can be a multi-part subject. Today I'm going to touch on one of the essential aspects of performing, which is that part of you looking down on yourself and the part of you that runs wild like a child. That's right. There is actually a basic element to performing that encompasses almost left and right brain, and you can't depend on just one of them. So how does this work in the real world? Well, you practice a great deal to be able to play precisely and accurately, and yet, in the moment of performance, you want to let yourself go. You want to be able to be creative at that moment and make something of the sound in that room at that moment with that audience, with the acoustics, with the sound of the piano at that time. Now, if you let yourself go too much, you might lose sense of what you're doing. For example, let's say you're playing a performance and you just go with total abandon. You let the emotions take you where they will. And then you find yourself playing a tempo you've never played before, maybe faster because you got excited by the audience and the sound of the piano. And you realize, oh my gosh, I can't play it this fast. I've never practiced it at this tempo. There's an example where you do need that other part of you, almost like a mother looking down, taking care of yourself. So you have to have these two elements. Now, if you only play with that rational left brain, it can be kind of boring and sterile. After all, a musical performance is not something etched in stone like a painting is. It's something that only comes to life at that moment of the performance. And it's not one size fits all. If you tried to play exactly the same performance more than once, you could never do it because the variables are different. First of all, just as if you were having a conversation with someone, you could never repeat the exact same conversation. It's impossible because just the passage of time and the perspective you have from one moment to the next changes. So it is with a musical performance. So ultimately, it's the balance of how much you let yourself go and yet have that other part of you looking down to make sure you don't take too wild a turn in your performance. That balance between left and right brain, the yin-yang, that's what it's all about in a great musical performance. Forgive yourself. That's right. It's a very important element of performing. Now, if you've ever performed, you know that there is the element of chance. That's right, you practice so that you have consistency, but you come out there and you have a different audience, the piano may be different. Just having the room filled with people changes the acoustics, and you might get thrown for a moment. So how do you deal with that? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. The worst thing you can ever do is to get into a cyclical thought pattern, which I've talked about in a previous video. If you miss something, let's say, and what's the natural reaction? Your heart may start pounding, your palms could become sweaty, and the worst thing you can ever do is start thinking, oh my gosh, suppose I missed something else. And it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Why? Because once you take your mind off of the performance and into this fear, you're no longer concentrating on your performance, and your mind can play all kinds of tricks on you. So you have to remember, first of all, a musical performance is important, but it's never a life or death proposition for you. You have to forgive yourself and move on and stay in the moment. Worse yet, if you start thinking about your musical performance and start thinking of what's coming ahead and going, do I remember that part? Once you take yourself out of that moment, you can really screw yourself up playing mind games. It's much like when you lie down to sleep at night. If you've ever done this and you think, if I get to sleep right now, I'll get 8 hours sleep. And then you're lying there for a few minutes, you're just about to doze off and you think, I think I'm asleep. And then, oh my gosh, you're awake again. And if that happens once or twice, you could start getting into that cycle of, instead of just relaxing into sleep. Well, performance is much the same way. You want to stay in the moment and forgive yourself if anything goes wrong and keep in the moment, not worried about what is past or what's coming, but just enjoy the moment, staying involved, reaching the audience with the beautiful music. So that's the lesson for today. In a performance, remember, no one's going to die. So forgive yourself if something goes wrong. You're only human. Nobody plays perfectly. Stay in the moment, enjoy your performance, and you and your audience will be richly rewarded. Performers make mistakes. That is, classical performers. You see them on stage and they play, it seems effortless and perfect, but do they make mistakes? Now, there's a lot to this question because, first of all, of course, performers make mistakes, and brilliant performers sometimes will have train wrecks, but it's quite rare. Usually what happens is there'll be something that might happen, but unless you're intimately familiar with the score, seasoned performers know how to hide the mistakes well enough to not disrupt the performance. It's not that they're trying to make themselves look so great. It's that they don't want the audience to be encumbered with anything that's uncomfortable. So this is one skill set, but there's more to it than that, because performers today actually do play scarily accurately. It's compared to what it was a generation or two ago. In fact, if you listen to some of the great pianists of all time, from Alfred Cortot to Arthur Rubinstein to Schnabel, I mean, there are countless recordings that were made years and years ago, and many of the great performers from pre-World War II era, when recording was first, becoming prevalent, you'll hear lots of missed notes. So what's happened? How is everybody playing so accurately today, and what does this mean? Well, I've talked about this quite a bit. Of course, today it's obvious. Everybody hears everyone because of the internet. As a result, everyone is expected to achieve this high level, and there's a certain homogenization of interpretations and tempos and voicing and all kinds of things because everybody knows what the standard is. There's a standard level that's accepted today, whereas years ago there was much greater variety. It's true that the accuracy of performers and the sheer technical mastery that so many pianists and other instrumentalists have achieved is awe-inspiring, but on the flip side, there isn't as much experimentation. Sometimes these old performers, if you listen to these classic recordings, they'll take chances and liberties that nobody would dare today. Now, occasionally they'd fall flat on their faces, but when they didn't, they could achieve highs rarely heard anymore. So accuracy is important, and it is important not to make an audience feel uncomfortable. But yes, performers do make mistakes, even though they hide it extremely well. But it's not all about accuracy, is it? I'm interested in your comments, which you can send to livingpianos.com or right here on YouTube. It's a great subject, and I'd like to know what some of you think about the great old performers, and if the missed notes are too bothersome and you'd rather have more perfect performances, even if it sacrifices a little bit of the wild expression. How to avoid stress in your playing. Well, there are basically two components for avoiding stress, and we're going to talk about that today, and this is applicable to all instruments. Well, there are ways of practicing relaxation. That's right. And the ways to do that is to take some very, very small sections that you can play comfortably and build that way. Being aware of how you sit and how you breathe on a wind instrument so that you can really consciously add relaxation to your routine in your practicing. And you can get remarkable results just by paying attention. Like how you sit, sometimes I look at students and their shoulders are up and you can tell they're uncomfortable, and just putting your hands on their shoulders for a moment and say, relax, can make a huge difference for a singer, for a pianist, for a violinist, for any instrument. Being aware of how your body feels, how you're sitting or standing, all of this. What's the other component then? Well, there's only so much you can relax on an instrument depending upon how much technical proficiency you have, how much strength you have. That's right, with strength can come relaxation. On the piano, for example, or on the violin, the sheer amount of time you spend, same with a wind instrument. If you're only practicing, let's say, 30 minutes a day on any instrument, it might be difficult to be relaxed in some virtuoso music. So you have to build up your strength over time with exercises, scales, arpeggios, etudes, all sorts of repertoire. Just simply playing hours and hours a day, you'll build enough strength and comfort in your instrument that with that can aid playing in a more relaxed manner. So to recap today, there are two ways to aid in the relaxation and avoiding tension in your instrument. One is simply being aware and practicing small enough segments that you don't introduce any tension in your playing to begin with. The second is to grow what you can do by building your strength over time, by challenging yourself with repertoire, amount of practice that you do, the amount of time you spend with your instrument, and exercises, repertoire, all of that. Building strength over time is going to aid you in relaxing just as much as paying attention to how you sit, stand, and approach your instrument and never introducing tension in the first place. Work on both of these and you can avoid tension in your playing too. What makes a great musical performance? This is a very important subject, not just for music, but for life itself. Let me tell you a little story. Thomas Edison, when he was working on the light bulb, trying to perfect it, he tried many, many different things in his laboratory, and one time an experiment went very, very wrong and blew up his whole lab. His assistant, the story goes, said something to him like, "You must feel really dejected now." And Edison said something like, "Now I know yet another way not to make the light bulb." In other words, he took this not as a negative, but positive, because he found one more way that he could cross off his list, and eventually went on, persevered because he kept trying again and again. I think you can go through history and look at nearly all the great people in history, and they've all faced failure as a catapult to success. Well, the same is true in musical performance. For example, when I go to student recitals and I hear somebody play all the way through a piece with no problems, sure, I'm impressed. But you know what's even more impressive? When I see a student play and they run into trouble, maybe a memory slip or something goes terribly wrong for a moment, but they recover, they keep going, and have a good overall performance. This is so important. Why is this so important? Well, if you've ever watched a film, for example, and right in the middle of the film, it loses frame and the timing goes off, it's jarring. The same thing is true in a musical performance. If you're playing through a piece of music and you miss a note, and then you go back just a couple of notes even, and you lose the timing, everyone in that audience, even if they are unschooled in music completely, will notice something went wrong, just like in a film when it jars. But you know what? If they just kind of keep going, just like in a film, if the continuity isn't perfect, like somebody's wearing a wristwatch in one scene and the next scene they're not wearing it, sure, the continuity is wrong, but most people won't notice it. Same thing is true in a musical performance. That's why when you hear a great performer on any instrument, they don't make a big deal about anything that isn't perfect. It's not about perfection. It's about the effect and the emotion. And your audience isn't there keeping score. They're there to enjoy themselves. So let them enjoy themselves and do your best to keep the continuity of your performance. Learn from your mistakes, and you can achieve greatness in your music and in life. How to practice performing. It's so imperative that you practice performing. But how can you do such a thing? You probably know, if you've ever tried to play for someone, that things can go haywire. And you wonder, how can this be? You practice a piece, you can play it over and over again perfectly, and you try to play it for someone, for a friend, or maybe for your teacher, and everything goes wrong, and you wonder, what can you do about such a thing? Quite a bit, really. Now, naturally, preparation is key. You can't expect to do something in front of people that you can't even do consistently on your own. So preparing like crazy, practicing slowly is a great way to reinforce your memory and your security in performance, because there is a certain way that you look at yourself and are analyzing everything that's happening when you go a little bit more slowly, which is a little bit akin to what happens when you're playing for somebody. Suddenly, all the things that kind of automatically come out, you're hyper-focused, and you notice every little thing that maybe you didn't really notice before. Have you ever felt that? So it's the same thing when you go more slowly. It's more deliberate. So that is a terrific way to solidify so that you feel more in touch and in control when you're performing. Now, to practice this, first of all, and I've talked about this a number of times, just recording yourself, setting up a device, set up your phone or a computer or anything, it can be audio or video, and make it a performance. Get yourself psyched up like pretend it's a person there. And most importantly, once that gets rolling, for better or for worse, go through it. I know you can always restart it, but don't. Make it a real performance. And you know what? You could always do another performance later if you're not happy with the way it came out. But don't stop halfway through and start again, because you know what? That is not an option when you're playing for people. Nobody wants to hear you start over. That's the worst thing for them, because, it's kind of like if you're hearing a story from somebody and they stumble over a few words after they've given you several paragraphs, they go, oh, wait a minute, and they start all over the story. You're going to be really bored with them. I get to the point already. I heard this already. So it's really important to learn to keep going. One of the most important aspects. So after you've gotten comfortable playing for a machine that records you, you do this again and again until you can just turn on that machine, boom, and you can do a really comfortable performance that you're happy with. Then it's time to bring in the troops. Hopefully you have a loved one or a good friend who likes music enough that they'll sit and listen to you play something. You can play for them, and once again, even though they're good friends and they'll forgive you if you stopped and started again, don't do that. Take advantage of the fact that you have this performance opportunity and play through for them. Plus, they'll enjoy it more if you don't stop. Even if you're not happy with the performance, they will enjoy it more if there's continuity. Even if you're really upset that you missed something and you really want to get it right, be in the service of your listener. This isn't about you anymore. It's about your audience when you're performing. Practice is the time you can stop anytime you want and make those repairs that are necessary. When you're playing for people, it's all about them. Make the experience enriching for them, which means don't start over. They don't want to hear that. They'd much rather have a little stumble and at least get the sense of the continuity of the piece you're playing for them. Then challenge yourself with more people. Perhaps you have company over and you say, hey, anybody like music? Be bold. Or maybe you have a spouse or someone who could say, hey, you want to hear some music? I've been hearing some great things. And give yourself an opportunity to play for more than just one person. In other words, you want to build up. So at first you start just with lowest pressure possible, just playing by yourself. Then you start with recording yourself, then playing for maybe a single person who you don't feel nervous for. Then several people, larger and larger numbers of people. Then finally, if you're ever in a place with a piano, particularly if it's a better piano than what you get to play on, what a great opportunity to play through your music and have to adjust to another instrument. This is a tremendous challenge. You may discover things about the piece that you never even thought of before, just hearing it on a different piano. Plus, when all the eyes are on you, you're hyper-focused, and that attention you're giving can really aid in coming up with new things in the music. Of course, the downside of that is you might become distracted by the eyeballs on you, and things might fall apart. But guess what? This can help you to strengthen your performance because you'll know what to practice. You'll know what the weak points are. So building up from smaller to larger audiences is a great way to grow your performing. Do it as many times as it takes to become comfortable. And you'll find that whenever there's a new piece, you may need to repeat this process. Just because you can play several other pieces well, if you've never performed a piece, you want to break it in. My father, who performed at Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center and in Europe and all around the country, he would always have tryout recitals. Before he played in public in a hall, he would invite people over and play through his program, and he would try to do this a number of times before the actual event. He would oftentimes record himself. And that way he'd know what state the performance was in, and it would help him to focus his practice. So this is a great idea for anybody on any level. So once again, remember to practice performing. You will be richly rewarded. It will take your piano playing to the next level. If you never perform your music for anyone, you'll never have that opportunity to really understand what it's all about. So go for it. You have nothing to lose. And you know what? If you start with a loved one, they will appreciate it. And you can't imagine how much people really do appreciate live music. So give it a try. How to disguise mistakes in your performance. That's right. You know, obviously we all practice so that we won't make any mistakes. But after all, we are human. And I don't care who you are and how accomplished you are, there are going to be times that things don't go as planned. There's a myriad of reasons for this. Maybe there's a problem with the instrument you're playing. Maybe there's a distraction in the audience. It could be almost anything. A finger can slip. You know, things do happen. Your memory might fail you if it's a piano performance for memory. It could be many, many different factors. Now, the way that you really must think about a musical performance is with continuity. And that is the secret of disguising any mistakes. Think of it this way. Imagine a locomotive, a big, heavy train pulling a bunch of cars. Imagine it got off the tracks. This could be a total disaster. And just imagine the wreckage that would ensue. But if it manages to get back on those tracks, let's say it flips off the tracks for a moment, and then it manages to just get back on the track, it would be a minor blip. It would be a very frightening moment for the engineer, but other people in the train might not even realize anything had all happened. That's the same thing in musical performance. You must keep it moving. Another analogy is you go to you're watching a motion picture. Now, in the olden days when they had actual film, sometimes there'll be a glitch and a momentary thing disrupts the picture, and you'll get the timing will be off for just a moment, and it's very jarring. In fact, if you were watching a movie and in the middle, and you kind of were zoned out, you weren't even paying attention, you were thinking about other things, and if suddenly the time element just shifted a moment and it either skipped or went back a moment, it's jarring. It gets your attention. So it is with a musical performance. Let me demonstrate by playing the beginning of the Appassionata Sonata of Beethoven, and I'm going to purposely make a little mistake, and then I'm going to be jarred for a moment, and I'm going to go right on, but I'm going to take a moment where I lose the continuity of the timing, and listen how totally apparent it is. Anyone in the audience, even if they have the most rudimentary knowledge of musical performance, will say, oh my gosh, there was a mistake there. It's so obvious because the timing is affected. So now I'm going to make a similar mistake, but I'm going to keep on moving. And here's what you must do in a musical performance. You must keep your fingers going and keep thinking where you are in that performance. And I can tell you that there will be times in a musical performance, if you play enough of them, where you'll get completely discombobulated for a moment, and you must keep the music moving. Now, this is really essential if you're playing with other musicians, because if you lose your timing, then you're not going to be together with the rest of the group. So watch how much more tolerable a similar mistake is when the timing is maintained. Now, for any of you Beethoven purists, anybody intimately familiar with this piece, it's still pretty jarring. But for those not intimately familiar with the piece, they won't notice it at all. More than that, if it was in the middle of a long program, the listener might almost think, did that actually happen, or did I just imagine it? Sometimes you wonder if it was you or the performer, because if everything just continues going normally, you forget about it. It's inconsequential. And that's the idea. So this isn't about trying to make yourself look better than you are. It's not an ego thing. It's a gift to the audience, so they don't have to suffer through any problems you're having. They can just continue enjoying the music without being distracted by the piece, being keenly aware and taking them out of that magical moment. How to deal with failure in musical performance. Boy, you know, anybody who's played music has had at least one experience in their lives which was a disaster. How can this be, and how can you deal with it? This is what we're going to talk about today, and it's very important. Now, why is this so important? It's because we are all human. We are not machines. The whole aspect of live performance is the wonder of what's going to happen. That's why people go to the circus or watch sports, as well as musical events and musical theater and things, because there's the element of chance. You don't know what's going to happen. Sometimes you have amazingly pleasant surprises, and other times there are unpleasant surprises. So what do? You play a musical performance you prepared for months, you go out and you bomb. At least in your own mind, you feel that way. Well, believe it or not, when you are done with that musical performance, first of all, what looms so large in your mind is not a big deal to the audience. Why is that? Because the audience doesn't have the same frame of reference that you have. You know your best. They don't. If you don't hit your best, you're going to be very, very upset with yourself, but the audience doesn't know any different. So the audience is going to enjoy what they enjoy, and you don't want to spoil it for them. So if you've done a performance and you feel you did miserably, and somebody comes over to you and they say, "Oh, thank you, I really enjoyed that," the worst thing you can ever say to them is say, "No, it was terrible." Now, why is it so bad? Well, obviously you think it's because it makes you look bad, but that's not it. That's certainly part of it. There's no reason to tarnish your career just because you feel bad about a performance. The real reason is that it's an insult to the audience. Somebody came, they went out of their house, they drove there, they sat through a performance, they enjoyed it, they took the time to tell you that they liked it. For you to then tell them, "No, you're wrong, it was bad and you shouldn't have enjoyed it," it's insulting their intelligence. Let them enjoy it. If they enjoyed it, that's their business. Doesn't mean that you won't go back to the practice room and put together a better performance for next time. So here are some of the benefits of failure. Failure is one of the best teachers you have, because you will learn things from a failed performance that you would never learn in a successful performance sometimes. You will find weaknesses you didn't know were there. It gives you the opportunity to strengthen your weaknesses. So you must look at failure as a learning opportunity. It's just a performance. No one dies. It's not like the trapeze artist, you know? We not only have a net, we can't even fall, you know? We're in good shape. It's just music. We get very attached and we're very concerned about our own musical performances, but you've got to realize it's all about your own ego. And the audience isn't there for your ego. They are there for their own enjoyment. Make it as enjoyable for them as possible. Take failure as a learning experience and prepare like crazy for future performances, particularly after one that you are not very happy with. So, if you do have a devastating experience, you do not want to allow it to regenerate itself, because The worst thing that can happen is if you have a mishap in a performance, is start locking your brain, think, oh, what's going to happen next, and make a self-fulfilling prophecy of mistakes. The same thing can happen in multiple performances if you start thinking that way. So the first step is to prepare furiously for your next performance and try to make it a low-stress performance. If you've just had a performance that was disappointing to you, next time you perform, maybe just do an in-home concert or play informally for friends, just so you get comfortable and get the reassurance and the positive feedback of an audience, and to know yourself that you can get through it again and build up to more important performances with the experience of performing the very same program for more than one small audience before going out with the high-pressure stakes again. Start building positive experiences so you develop your confidence again. And this is the most important thing, is to keep your attitude positive and be prepared so you can enjoy your performance, because you can practice and practice, and if you go out there and even play accurately but you're not enjoying it, guess what? Your audience won't either. We are expressing emotions, so how you feel about your music is vital. Keep yourself positive and keep the love for your music, whatever it takes. That's the most valuable asset you have. Performance anxiety, avoiding negative self-talk. You know what? You believe what you say. I've seen this happen so many times with performers, and it's not just in music. It's in everything in life, whether it's sports, whether it's an interview, whether it's public speaking. It doesn't matter. You believe what you say in your head to yourself. Like if you say, oh, I know I'm going to bomb this performance. Guess what's going to happen? You're probably going, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you believe what you've told yourself. So you've got to be careful what you say in your mind before a performance, or, oh, I always screw up in this place, or, oh, I think I'm going to be really nervous for this. You have to change your thought process into really being able to project and envision a positive outcome. Imagine yourself at a performance playing with all the details of what you want, coming out successfully. Live in that moment in your head. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and meditate on that moment. So when you get there, it's familiar, and you've already set yourself up for success. It's so vitally important. This can go from anything from your piano lesson to a job interview. Imagine yourself sitting there and having a positive experience. And just keep that in your head and in your mind. And guess what? If you start telling yourself, hey, I can do this. Yeah, this is going to go okay. I feel good about this. Then it's going to have a good repercussion. Once you start that negative self-talk, it's a spiral that's really hard to get out of. So be careful what you say to yourself. It will manifest itself either positively or negatively. It's really important in musical performance and in life itself. I'm sure you've been through it. If you're watching this video, you practice, you practice, you practice, you practice, you think you got it, and then you play for people and everything goes haywire. You go, what is the matter with me? You're thinking. Well, I got news for you. There's nothing the matter with you. It is human nature. You know, we are wired for the fight or flight response. And when you have a bunch of eyes looking at you and you're performing, it's natural for your body's functions to get elevated. You might get a little sweaty palms. Your heart rate might go a little faster. You get that nervous feeling inside. This is normal. So what can you do to mitigate these natural physiological reactions? Well, number one, you have to realize that performing is fundamentally different from practicing. And you have to draw a wall, a line that you never cross, that you know which one you're doing. So, number one, of course, prepare more than you think you should. Like, way more. Before you ever perform, you should have a piece so solid that, you can wake up in the morning and sit down at the piano first thing, you can just play it. You can be tired and you can play it. Any situation that you really, really have worked every which way, of course, slow, methodical, practice without the pedal, metronome speeds for sections that give you problems, all of it. Try and different ways of playing, louder, softer. And that's one of the things, by the way. The next step is play not just slowly and securely, play faster than it even goes. Why? Because when you get excited or nervous, you're naturally going to play faster than you think you are. I can't begin to tell you how many times I've experienced this as a teacher, where I have a student who has prepared diligently, and the performance comes and they're going, whoa, so they start, oh my gosh, how are they going to get through this thing? Have they ever played it this fast? And they don't even realize you're going that fast. Why? Because your physiology is sped up, and therefore you're playing faster. And if you haven't practiced playing faster, you're in trouble. So play faster, and of course slowly. Slow practice is such a strength builder for you anyway. Now here's one that's so important. You must practice performing. You might wonder, how can you do that? Well, you can psych yourself into it. Better yet, put up your phone or another recording device and pretend it's a performance. Even announce it as if it's a person. Maybe you have company coming over. You thought, wouldn't it be nice to play for them on your nice new piano if they ask? And you want to get into it. So you put that up there, pretend it's the people. And here's the key. No matter what happens, don't stop the recording and start again. Go for it and see how you recover. And I can tell you also, as a teacher, when I hear students play, how they recover in performance to me is almost more important than how they perform. Because no matter what level you're on, even the greatest concert pianists in the world have finger slips or memory issues, and it's the recovery that sets it apart and makes for a satisfying performance for the audience and makes the performer feel better about what they've done. So then after you recorded, have low stress playing, like maybe you have a spouse or a good friend, or a child even, and just, can you sit here and play for them? So you just get used to it and then build from there and build, then maybe you have several people over, and instead of preparing for one big event and hope that everything goes well, do many smaller events and build up to it. My father, Morton Estrin, was a great concert pianist, and whenever he had a performance, like a New York recital, playing at Lincoln Center or something like that, he would have tryout recitals. He would do it early on. As soon as he had the program under his belt, he would just invite a few close friends first to perform the program, to see where to practice it, to see what things maybe weren't as strong as he thought. And then he'd do maybe a couple of these to be able to work through the nerves, work through the pacing, the energy level. It's invaluable. Another thing that is awesome, if you have the possibility to play on different pianos, particularly if you're going to play a performance somewhere else and you're playing on a different piano, boy, wouldn't it be great to try it on different pianos? Well, maybe that's impossible. You think, there's no piano I can play on. Well, there's a couple of hacks you can do. Like here I have a piano and it's all the way open. Well, you could actually have your piano completely closed, even with a fly lid closed, get a different sound. Or if you have an upright, open it up if it's not usually open. Try to do something to get a different sound out of your piano, make it feel different, so that you can see what happens, and do it cold. So it's just like suddenly you're there. And the last tip is perhaps the most important of all, and I learned to do this many, many years ago, which is visualization. There are so many people, and I've met people in conservatory, they practice in the practice room, and they go out on the stage and they go, I don't want to look at them. And they want the audience to be dark so they can feel like they're playing all by themselves. Big mistake. First of all, what is a performance? A performance is a communication. You want to be aware of the audience. You know why? That same nervous energy can be used to propel you to places you've never thought of going before because you're excited about the moment. Things will happen that you couldn't have conceived of all by yourself. Use that energy and you'll be more creative on the spot. So this visualization is, you're sitting at home, you're doing this practice performance, you imagine the moment, maybe whether it's company coming over, maybe it's a performance in a venue, maybe it's a student recital you're playing in, whatever it is. You imagine being there. What I like to do is if I know what piano I'm playing on, let's say it's going to be a Schimmel, and I'll imagine what the Schimmel logo looks like, and I'll have that emblazoned in my head. And I'll take some deep, slow breaths and imagine being there, ready to play, the black and white keys. I'll imagine the room, the people looking at me, and I'll take some deep, slow breaths and feel the energy of that audience, and then think the music, and then play. That is almost like a post-hypnotic suggestion for when the performance comes. I do exactly the reverse. I look at that logo on the piano, I take the deep breath. It reminds me of all those times I've sat on my piano imagining this moment, and then I'm like in familiar territory. I'm not trying to block the audience out, I'm embracing them. And since I've looked forward to it, I can enjoy the performance and use their energy to inspire something I've never created before. Because remember, a musical performance isn't a regurgitation of everything you've done before. It is a new experience. It's a communication, and you get the energy from the audience, and the room is different, the acoustics are different. Even if you're playing in a room you've played in before, just having more bodies in there changes the acoustics, and you must create something fresh. So, those are the things. So remember, to recap, prepare way more than you think you should. You'll appreciate it when the moment comes. Play not just slower, but even faster. Work at different tempos. Play louder, play softer. Do everything so when the moment comes, you have more than a bag of tricks. You have an arsenal of things you can bring to your performance. Remember to practice performing. Separate it. Make that wall, that impenetrable wall between practicing and performing. And you can practice performing, and when you practice performing, there's no stopping. Make it real. Then work up to small groups and larger groups as you get comfortable performing even the same pieces. Play on different pianos, or try to make your piano sound different so it can provide a new way of hearing, which is what's going to happen in a live performance. So it gives you a little inkling of how to adjust to a new situation, which is what a performance really is. And finally, and most importantly, use visualization. Imagine that moment you're going to perform so that you can be ready for it and enjoy it instead of being petrified at the shock. Oh my gosh, there's an audience here. I thought I could block them out. I can't. No, don't block them out. Embrace them. They will inspire things in your playing you didn't even know you had. 3 things every musician should know. Okay, well, basically, the 3 things I'm going to talk about today are, number 1, be true to yourself. This is true of almost any field, but in music it's particularly important, and I'll get into the reasons why in a moment. The second thing is versatility is paramount for a successful career in music. And last is that you have to keep things in perspective, that nobody gets hurt in a musical performance. Nobody dies, all right? So let's go through and talk about these. The first thing, to be true to yourself. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, it's very easy, particularly in a musical performance. You might be tempted to try to play a certain way that you think people might like. Or if you're a composer, you might be compelled to try to write music that you think people are going to enjoy, that could become popular. But you know what? You really can't be an artist and be imitative in that way. You have to go with what comes from inside, what you have a burning desire to share with people. You have to be honest in your expression, or people will feel the insincerity. So, as tempting as it might be to try to impress people with something that you can do that you think people might appreciate or be impressed with, this is not the sign of an artist, and ultimately you will fail. And even if you are successful, if you aren't sharing something that comes from deeply within yourself, then you haven't really achieved anything anyway. You won't feel good about the achievement, will you? So that's very important. Now, I talk about versatility. Well, you know, people specialize and specialize, particularly people who become music majors. You have to pick a certain instrument, and you have to pick a style. You know, it's very difficult to do both jazz and classical, to be able to play different instruments. Double majoring is extraordinarily difficult, even within music, not to mention if you want to do more than one field. But the fact is, as a musician, the more things that you can do, the more marketable you are. So for example, if you are a very accomplished classical violinist, you might find some work, but imagine if you can also play bluegrass and jazz, and maybe you also write some music, and maybe you're adept at recording technology, and maybe you teach. The more things you can do, the more opportunities are to work. And believe me, in this world, having extra skill sets can really foster a career. One thing can lead to another, and you might find you really enjoy some of these related fields. All right. The last thing is incredibly important that all musicians have to keep in mind, which is in a musical performance, it may feel really scary, but nobody dies. It's not like being a brain surgeon or a pilot. You are just there for enjoyment, to share your passion for music, and you have to keep things in perspective. The other thing is that things that loom so large in your mind are actually not important to the audience. The audience is not there to hear what mistakes when things go wrong. And in fact, they don't have a perspective because they don't know your best. So if you're not up to par, it's not that meaningful to them as it is to you. So give yourself a break in a musical performance. We're all human. Not every performance is going to go exactly as you intended, but sometimes you have a pleasant surprise and things go in directions that you didn't even expect them to when you get inspired by an audience. 3 ways of performing music. Yes, there are 3 intrinsic thought processes I'm going to talk about. And they don't just apply to performing music, they apply to life itself, which is why I've been really thinking a great deal about how I present this to you. I hope you enjoy this and welcome your comments. The 3 types of thought patterns with performing are linear, random, and cyclical. And I'm going to go through each of these and explain what they are first and then apply them to performance for you. So, what does a linear thought process look like? Well, obviously, even speaking is a linear process, word to form thoughts. Music is a linear experience after all. And in Western civilization, scientific method is a beautiful example of a linear process, a linear thought process. If this is that, then this is the result, and so on. This is how hypotheses become theories and so forth. The next type of thought process is random thought process. This is more exemplified by Eastern thinking. For example, meditation is kind of a random thought process. As Westerners, we think of meditation as clearing the mind because, yes, it's necessary to stop the internal dialogue, but just because you aren't identifying things and labeling them doesn't mean you're not thinking. In fact, when meditating, you are aware of your surroundings, the brain is functioning. It's a pure thought, sometimes described as. And the third type is called cyclical thinking. And what is cyclical thinking? Well, of the 3, cyclical is truly a destructive thought process. An extreme example is obsessive-compulsive behavior, where someone repeats an action over and over again and beyond their own control. Drug addiction. More common examples are insomnia. You lie in bed at night and you have plenty of time to sleep, and just at the moment you're about to fall asleep, you think, oh, good, I'm going to sleep. Oh, I got to get up tomorrow, and oh. And then you're a little agitated, and you say, oh, no, that's fine, go back to sleep. And of course, you set yourself up for the same pattern. Just as you're falling asleep the next time, the same thing happens. And it goes round and tossing and turning all night long. Like a feedback loop. When you put a microphone by a speaker and you get a horrendous noise, it's the same thing. In this case, it's emotional noise, and it's very troubling. So how does all this relate to musical performance? Well, musical performance is a thought process after all. So let's start with linear thinking. Linear thinking is absolutely essential for successful musical performance. After all, you have to get from one note to the next, from one phrase to the next, to have a successful musical performance. But it's more than that. A great musical performance is an expression of emotions and feelings about the music, and the love for your audience, and so many other things that come into play. And strictly a linear process of getting from A to B to C can be nothing more than that if you're not careful. Well, that's where random thought can come in. Yes, you prepare for weeks and months for musical performance, and you get there, and Well, now the piano is fresh. Maybe it's a different instrument than you've played before. The hall has different acoustics. And yes, the audience plays into it also. And maybe you're inspired to try new things at your whim. That playful part of you just exploring and taking off and in ways that you maybe never did in practice before. This can be so electrifying to hear a performance like this. Of course, you don't want to take a wrong turn and end up in an exposition when you're supposed to be at the recapitulation in a sonata, or worse yet, take a tempo you've never taken before and end up playing something faster than you've ever practiced it. That's where a really balanced performance has to contain elements of linear and random thinking to really be successful, because you have to have that part of you looking down, making sure you keep everything straight, yet allow the playfulness and the spontaneity to engage the audience as well as yourself in a piece maybe you've played hundreds of times, to be able to keep it fresh and exciting. It's important to have that random thought combined with the linear route to keep things really stable. Now, I talked about the dangers of cyclical thinking. Well, this can happen in musical performance also. You've prepared for months on a performance, practiced who knows hundreds of hours. The moment comes and you go out and you're raring to go, and then some unfortunate happens, a distraction in the audience or a finger slip, and what happens? You make a mistake, and of course the nerves, the heart pounds. You think, oh, that's okay. Oh, I shouldn't make a mistake again. And you start thinking about the next mistake, and oh, there you know it. You've set yourself up in a pattern that repeats again and again, destroying the potential for a great performance. So cyclical thinking should be avoided at all costs. To recap, successful performance combines elements of linear thinking and random thinking. Ideally, you should have that playful part of you, trying new things, getting the sound, working with the audience in ways that are fresh and exciting and engaging to you, so the audience is also engaged. But you must always have that linear part that keeps things straight, that's watching down, making sure you don't take a wrong turn or get too carried away for your own good. And avoid that cyclical thinking. It's bad news. Forgive yourself for a mistake. After all, it's only music. No one's going to die. There's no danger. Make it enjoyable for yourself. Let your audience enjoy it. They're not there because they want to see mistakes. They don't care about mistakes. They just want to hear beautiful music. So make it happen for yourself and your audience, and you can enjoy a lifetime of musical performance. Thanks for joining me, Robert Estrin, here at livingpianos.com. I really welcome your comments and any observations about your own thought process during musical performance, and I will post them for others to enjoy as well. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.